Hello everyone. In a recent video I talked about main power, why the ability is good, and why it should come back in Splatoon 3. However, I did mention that I felt damage up was a problem and an effect that the ability shouldn't give. So today, I want to go through and do the hard part of replacing every single weapon with damage up and give it an entirely new effect. If you find these ideas interesting and want to see more from me, you can be sure to subscribe for more content. And without further ado, let's get into these brand new effects. First up is a sploosh. I wanted to try giving one weapon a form of alternate fire, so main power-up only affects this weapon when it's jumping, in which it drastically reduces the RNG by up to 75% and gives the weapon up to 5% more range. This basically turns it into a slightly faster killing but much shorter range Splash-O-Matic whenever it jumps. I think this adds a ton of options to sploosh and gives it a completely different playstyle that's optional to run. Next up is the Splash-O-Matic. First of all, Splash would be buffed to do 30 damage per shot. This will be the case with a few weapons that remove MPU damage up, since 30 damage is the minimum to break armor. As for the main power-up effect, Splash will get reduced drop-off damage, similar to what Slosher has right now, since this is absolutely essential for the weapon with its short range and dependence on jumping, so having that 4-shot be reliable is something that the weapon absolutely needs. Slosher Pro is pretty dependent on main power-up damage right now, so we're giving it two buffs. The first one is decreasing its jump RNG. Pro is pretty good accuracy, but it could be better, and that'll help it poke a lot more in fights. But, secondly, Pro is going to get increased painting capabilities similar to other shooters with the same effect, which should help for it to be able to charge its special faster and contribute more in a long-term fight. 96 will be getting reduced RNG on both standing and jumping, pretty standard. And we're also going to give it a slight amount of reduced damage drop-off just as a bonus effect to make sure it's a consistent 2-shot weapon. Next up is the Dualies and Dapple Dualies. For the Dualie class as a whole, I want main power-up to affect the actual rolls themselves. So for the normal Dualies and Dapple Dualies, the rolls will go up to 15% farther, which should help them a lot in being able to close the gap, something they really struggle with right now. Next up for the Dualie Sculptures. I'm going to give this one two effects, and the first one is going to be reducing its jump RNG. Dualie Sculpture has some of the worst RNG in the entire game, especially when it jumps, and with damage being taken away, it'll absolutely need that reduced. Secondly, the dodge roll slides themselves will go further, which not only gives you better distance, but it allows you to stay in turret form longer, meaning your kill time can be faster, which is a pretty interesting thing that I think the Sculptures can take advantage of, and gives them a faster kill time with damage up removed. Belugas are up next, and they're going to get one of the more drastic buffs I'll be doing, which is increasing their roll speed. Rather than just distance, this means the action of the roll themselves will simply happen faster, which makes them way harder to track, adds more variance to how fast your rolls can be, and overall makes them way more useful than they currently are. I currently feel like Belugas have a bit too slow rolls for the weapon to take advantage of, and having them be a little bit faster would be a huge thing for the weapon. Last up are the Tetra Dualies, which in addition to getting a normal buff of 30 damage from 28, will have the end lag of their last roll reduced by up to 10 frames depending on how much MQ you run. Tetras have 48 entire frames before they can do an action after using 4 dodge rolls, so having the option for this to be reduced removes one of its biggest weaknesses, at the cost of around half your gear, of course. Next up is rollers, and I'm actually going to be covering all 4 rollers together. First of all rollers have damage up, which will be replaced with a different effect, but to make up for the lack of damage up, all of the vertical flicks on all of the rollers will be increased to do 45 instead of 40 minimum damage, which should make the vertical flicks more consistent on all of them. Secondly, the new main power-up effect rollers will get will also be the same for all 4 of them, which will have to do with their roll speed. It'll be 2 buffs. The first one will be decreasing the amount of time it takes to go into your maximum roll speed, basically the time before you speed up, and the second one will be making that final roll a tiny bit faster. Rolling isn't that useful on rollers, so a little bit of a buff to make it a bit better as an escape option is something this class could really use. Hydra is another weapon where I'm going with a more drastic buff, which in this case will be reducing the charge time of the first ring. While this is pretty drastic, Hydra's charge time is so long that it's still going to be quite a considerable delay before it gets its charge off. The second ring is already pretty fast, so I see no reason in making it any quicker. Ballpoint was nerfed quite considerably, and these main power-up buffs will be used to revert some of those changes at the cost of gear dependency. In this case, the shot velocity and range will both have slight increases. YouTuber's main gimmick is the charge hold, which right now just isn't good enough to see any form of competitive use. So we're going to be giving it a pretty drastic MPU buff. Main power-up will reduce the glow by up to 90%, making it way harder to see. Bamboozler will have its charge speed increase slightly and its paint increase slightly. This should encourage more double partial charges to get kills rather than full charges. Splat chargers really struggle with painting nowadays, but they don't deserve to have the paint be brought back without any downsides. Having their paint be back to normal but with gear dependency is much more fair, so chargers will have main power-up increase their painting capability just like it does with E-Leader. L3 is the only semi-automatic to not have perfect RNG, and it's drastically hurt by it, so it will have its jump RNG drastically reduced. H3 will be getting two buffs, one that slightly increases its shot velocity for rewarding players with good aim, and the second one for decreasing damage drop-off, so it can still reliably 3-shot people, even without damage up. Squeezer is all about poking power with no jump RNG and a lot of range, so it will have drastically decreased fall-off damage with main power-up, making it way more reliable at long distances, even slightly outside the weapon's effective range. Adding custom main power-up effects taught me two things. Number one, Nintendo added a lot more damage up weapons than meets the eye, including every single roller and every single dually. I'm not quite sure why they did it on so many weapons, but it is an interesting choice given the variety of effects you can do with main power-up. And secondly, there's a lot of custom main power-up effects that haven't even been tried. There's a ton of potential with this ability that hasn't been tapped into yet, and I'd love to see Nintendo try even harder in the third game and really try to push what things they could give weapons. There are so many creative ideas that could be said, and I'm sure there's better ones than I've come up with, so I really want to see what Nintendo can do when changing and reworking main power-up effects in the future. But let me know what you guys think of main power-up and its effects. After everything I've said in these two videos, do you still want main power-up in the third game, or do you think it's a recipe for disaster? Be sure to let me know. I really hope the reputation of main power-up can change. The ability has the potential to be the best thing Nintendo's ever added in terms of gear, and I hope with Splatoon 3 they really get to show that. But that's all my thoughts on it. Thank you guys so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.